If your gray tank is inside of your van, like mine is, it's gonna smell. Flies can make their way into your composting toilet and then from there escape out into the entire rest of the van. Weight still plays a part in driving. People will just know you as the van life person, and that's who you are now. Well, good morning. I woke up pretty early today, if I do say so myself, although now it's almost the afternoon. I was woken up this morning because this person was like whacking weeds and mowing the lawn like right outside my van. Like the stuff he was whacking, like the grass was like flying into the side of my van, and I was like, okay, guess it's time for me to wake up then. I'm just parked at this public park. Very beautiful here, just near the river. So I'm making pancakes this morning. I have this really delicious, oh my gosh, this tastes so good. It tastes like heaven. And something I've been craving recently is just like pancakes. I don't know why, but it's a multi-grain pancake mix. I need to do 1 egg as per the recipe. I use an egg replacement. Right now what I'm using is ground chia seeds. So I do 1 tablespoon of the ground chia into the bowl with 3 tablespoons of cold water. And the reason this works is because if you think about what an egg is in a recipe, it just acts as a binder to bind the other ingredients together. So if you don't eat eggs, there's quite a few alternatives that you can use instead of eggs. So as I'm mixing this, you can see that the ground chia is absorbing the water and it's turning into like a gel consistency. And that's pretty much the consistency of an egg. So some other alternatives that I've also used when baking when I need an egg is like applesauce. I've used mashed banana. You can also use ground flax instead of ground chia. Vanilla almond milk. 1 cup of pancake mix. Another thing I love adding to my pancakes is just a little sprinkle of chocolate chips. Here's the pancake mix. As I make my pancakes, I'm going to talk to you about 5 things that I've never heard anyone talk about in van life. So as a little bit of a backstory, a few years ago, I purchased a truck camper, spent a few years renovating that, and then I traveled around Vancouver Island for about half a year with my partner in the truck camper. It was great, but it taught me that I really wanted a van of my own. So we sold the truck camper, I purchased my own van, and I traveled part-time in my van throughout the last few years, but now I've been living in my van full-time since January, so I think about 7 months now. Some of them are negative, some of them are just neutral, but I'm like, what the heck? It would have been great if someone had let me know these things, that these things are a possibility. All right, I need a spatula, that would help. The first thing that I recently experienced is if your gray tank is inside of your van, like mine is, it's gonna smell. It's gonna stink up the whole van. And this is something that I recently experienced. I was driving with my windows down and the air was just smelling all the time. And at first I thought it was maybe the area that I was in. And then I'm like, maybe I have like mice living in my van and I'm like smelling their poo. Come to discover it's actually my gray tank. So my gray tank is underneath my sink right here. I learned that this is like a common thing to happen with RVs and camper vans. Is like if you especially drive with the windows down, it's going to create a negative pressure within the van, and all of the smell of the gray tank that's underneath the sink is going to come up out of the sinkhole and just waft around the van, and it smells like crap, let me tell you. I'm so hungry. So with the smell, there's nothing really you can do about it. Maybe you can try to clean the gray tank with some bleach, maybe try to get the smells out. I don't know. For me, I just leave it as it is and I try my best not to drive with my windows down, which is hard because it's summer and I don't have air conditioning. The way that I also temporarily fix the smell is by pouring a little bit of water into the sink, and what that does is kind of refill up the P-trap underneath with new water. The purpose of the P-trap is to trap the smells of the gray tank underneath that freshest level of water. So sometimes refreshing the P-trap water can help. It's something that I haven't really found a solution for yet. All right, so another thing I recently experienced in my van, you can go watch my most recent video about it, is I had a bug infestation in here. That is something a few people talk about, but not nearly enough people talk about. I have a composting toilet, which needs to be vented to the outside, bring in fresh air, puff out the old air, continually dry out the compost that's in there, right? The mesh that I had on my composting like vent on the outside of my van, the screen mesh material that I was using was not fine enough. So it was allowing, I still don't know what they were. I'm just on the tail end of this, like just coming out of this, like the infestation has, I think at this point been resolved. It's been about a week since I completely bleached out my entire composting toilet and put traps all around my van. Basically, these little flies, gnat type, really tiny, tiny little flies, they were making their way through the mesh screen that I had on the outside and flying their way up the tube, making their way into my composting toilet, living in my poo and pee, living in there, breeding in there, and before I knew it, it went from like me seeing like a handful of flies in here a day to all of a sudden one day I killed 60 of them in here. If you want to watch my video, I explain like all the steps I took in order to get rid of them in that video, but that's something I've never heard anyone talk about, is how flies can make their way into your composting toilet and then from there escape out into the entire rest of the van. But I think if you want to have a composting toilet, or if you do have one, you need to be really careful about not letting flies get introduced to the solids bin, or at least to the inside of the composting toilet, because once you do, is a recipe for disaster. Like the problem is just going to continue to get worse. So that's pretty nasty. All right, another thing no one told me about living van life. This one is not negative, it's just a neutral thing, but your van is going to become the topic of conversation for pretty much everyone. Doesn't matter if they're a family member, if they're a friend, if they're a stranger. People are going to know you as the person who does van life. And people are naturally curious about this lifestyle, I think. So if you're parked in a parking lot, if you're camping, just be aware that strangers are going to be looking at your van, especially mine. I think it's unique because it's old. You don't really see my van on the road often at all these days. So people are always commenting on my van. If I'm driving stopped at a red light, my windows are down, I can hear the people in the car next to me commenting on my van. If I'm in a parking lot with my windows open and I'm inside the van, I can hear people outside my van talking about it, making comments about it, like, yo, that's a sick van. Like, that happened to me the other day. Your van is probably going to draw attention from other people. Also, this happens with friends, family. First, it was like, I feel like I'm known as like the van life girl in the family. At first, when I would see relatives, it would be like, hey, how's the van build going? Now it's like, hey, how's the van life going? And they'll ask me to show them my van. And so I give them a little tour. So what I'm trying to say is I just didn't know that this lifestyle would bring like so much attention from others and be like such a conversation starter with others, which isn't bad. But people will just know you as the van life person, and that's who you are now. Another thing to mention is when I was living in the truck camper, one thing I really didn't like about it was how heavy it was and how much weight it carried. When you're driving on roads, it made it really difficult to turn corners, really difficult to stop if needed. And that's something that I was really looking forward to with my van. You know, it's much smaller, it's much lighter. However, weight still plays a part in driving. And this is something that you really need to be aware of. I've never heard anyone talk about this, but it's like, obviously, our entire house is in the van, right? Of course, obviously, it's going to be heavy. It's kind of a no-brainer, but you really need to take precautions on the road when driving these heavy vehicles. Like, my van is quite small. It's nowhere near as large as like a Sprinter or like a Ram ProMaster or all those like big fancy builds. I can't even imagine what it's like for people who drive those. My van is not able to stop as quickly, obviously, as modern cars, and that's something that other people on the road don't realize, is that I'm taking my time to stop, I'm taking my time to speed up, I'm taking my time to turn corners, because I have to. Otherwise, everything in here is going to go flying. And that's something that other drivers might not understand, and they will get impatient. They get so impatient with me driving on the road. It endangers them, it endangers me, it endangers other people. People driving like this around me used to really irritate me when I first started driving my van, but now I've kind of come to accept it. Every time I start driving, I'm like, this is what I need to expect and I need to be prepared for it, especially in the city. Just always being on my guard, having my guard up, defensively driving, paying attention, not getting too distracted, and giving myself lots and lots of distance between my van and the people in front of me. When you drive a heavy vehicle, you kind of need to relearn how to drive. You're gonna get cooped up in here, okay? You're living in such a tiny space, and it's important for you to get out of your van and get some fresh air, get outside into the world every single day. I feel like a lot of people just pretend that van life is just okay and that everyone is like okay with the fact that they're living in a small space. And of course, we're living in here by choice. Those of us who have the luxury to live in here by choice, and because of the fact that we just want to, and the fact that it's convenient to have your house with you wherever you go, and it's easy to travel to new places and such, it's great. But the fact of the matter is that you're living in an extremely small space. If I want to step from my bed to my cab, it's probably 3 steps. Like, that's how small my van is. You're gonna get sick of being in here. Every day I make the effort and the time to go outside and get fresh air and go out into the world and interact with people and just leave my van at least for a few hours every day. I think it's okay to feel this way. Like, just because you live in a van doesn't mean you have to spend all of your time in here, and doesn't mean that you have to always be okay with living in such a small space. It's okay to want to get outside. It's okay to want to leave the small space and go out into the world and have a break from this. There's even some van lifers who are a little bit more transparent with this, where they will stay in an Airbnb or they will go stay in a hotel for a few days just to get a break from the van and just like have some space.